I was just smiling with Mr. Producer about the 360. We're at the 360 videos mark. Um, I do need to organize them better for you. I went to look for my whatever videos I might have done that are on things painters have said, and I found 183 and 255. But I thought I'd done what I'm doing now before. If I have and you haven't seen it, perfect. If I have and you have seen it, well, maybe I won't have used all these quotes. In any case, I found a bunch of nice quotes, things that I really got a lot of enjoyment out of. And in the past, enjoyment meaning both, if you want to say it that way, joy, but understanding. And they cover the arts in large, and they at the beginning here, some Greeks and Romans, and then it becomes, of course, more particularly about painting. I mentioned to you last week about the wider education of a painter, that it really pays to be aware of these kinds of the implications of that relate to all the arts when you read, study any other form, and including some of the simpler crafts too. How many, measure twice, cut once, things like that apply. So I've talked about that. So this is a result of me having done that kind of wider reading. I did find that when I was young, I would value these so much I'd write them down in a book or someplace, usually often on scrap pieces of paper, which if I was lucky, I would remember to collect and then copy them into a book. But I do recommend it. I like Gamel's idea of journaling, the idea of writing down something at the end of the day, each day. He particularly wanted us to write down things he had said, and I've already given you that. I think that's in 183. Well, some of those are in both. I see that I didn't attribute all those. Maybe verbally I did, but I noticed when I looked at the words, I didn't. In this case here, I'm going to attribute them. All the quotes I have, I'm going to attribute. So you'll have that information. But I do recommend you those sources. Cicero, for example, says a lot about painting. It says many different things about the arts, including one that relates to last week's video. Somebody came back. I apologize, I can't remember your name, but I thank you for that comment. It was a really well-received comment. One thing I felt bad I hadn't said it myself, but it's in the second quote here. Let's look at the quotes. I don't have anything to read to you. I don't have any donations to report. And the questions are few and far between right now. So if anyone out there has anything they want to talk about, that it relates to our field or to something you're doing, even in just your own practice, that you may want a response about or a conversation about, do let me know. I haven't carefully looked these over. I know that sometimes these things have funny grammatical problems, typing problems. But let's just start with this. And I've just titled this on art and painting, as you've seen. The art is long. Life is short, opportunity fleeting, experiment dangerous, judgment difficult. Hippocrates, talking about the art. Cicero says the object of all art is to soften the manners, and by training the heart and mind to right thoughts and worthy sentiments. Cicero, there are quite a number of interesting comments by Cicero. I don't remember where I got them, and I know that when I go online to go hunting for quotes, I don't find that many. These are all from way back when I was first taking notes, having read whatever. I suppose, some of these conceivably, because I was a fan of the books of quotations when I was young. I really enjoyed them. There aren't historically that many on specifically related to our field that you'll find in Bartlett's book of familiar quotations or something. But so here's Plato talking. This is having to do with measuring and all that sort of stuff. Gamel said to me, the cure for measuring is more measuring. If arithmetic, mensuration, and the weighing of things be taken away from any art, that which remains will not be much, says Plato. Well, how true that is. The idea that the underlying both logic and slash mathematics slash geometry. It really is problematical if you're not applying those sorts of things in your work. Now, the degree to which there are other things. We're talking about intuitive things and that sort of thing. But if you're just talking about getting the look of the thing because it's got this wonderful quality you want and you can't get proportions right, well, that's the mensuration. That's the measuring portion of this thing, and so on. And you're always weighing things. For example, you're talking about chroma versus, which is the most chromatic note, and you're weighing one against the other of the notes you've put down. So, take Plato seriously. Two Greeks and a Roman, I'll leave it at that, right? Degas says, I must make myself fully aware that I know nothing. It's the only way to get ahead. And then he says at some other point that in a sense it's the only responsible thing to do for your clients, for your audience. But Degas, that's a Socrates idea, isn't it? I must make myself fully aware that I know nothing. Some other point he might have said how little I know. I've quoted him before. By the way, one reason I'm putting these on pages is so you can just have it. You can take a page shot if you want it. And for the rest of you who might be driving around in a car, I'm reading them. So you're not just stuck staring at them. And these are our pictures for today, by the way, these word groups. Here's 3-4 by Ang. Ang says, beautiful forms have fullness and firmness. Their details do not diminish the effect of the larger masses. So that I've often observed with Ang that you can feel the cup that is the hand and not just have counts of fingers, or the tube that is the finger before you see forms, folds, or fingernails on it. So the firmness idea, it's funny listening to Degas talk about Whistler saying he measures in distances and not in thicknesses. But that's in that idea of firmness even, the idea of firm, solid form. But the larger masses. Ang also says, Poussin had a habit of saying that it's in observing things that the painter becomes able, rather than entiring oneself in copying them. Oops, there's an is instead of an in. Yes, but a painter must have eyes. Now, that's an interesting question there, right? Observing things about life, observing things you see, noticing, just even if it's the idea of the form something takes. Ang is saying, yeah, but you also have to be able to see what it's making it with. Basically, I'm taking Ang to be effectively an appearance-based guy at this point. So it's not good enough to know and have even a feeling for that, but you also have to have a feeling for the values. And that's an eyeball thing, not just a familiarity by observing. I think it was Millet said he would at one point he was doing his wife as a subject, and she wasn't the subject. I take it all back. He was using his wife as a model for something he was working on, and he wasn't drawing from her. He was having her wear the same clothes day after day, so it would more completely take on the form of her body. So he then could memorize that. So that was an observing. He was observing to work later with what he'd observed in the studio. Perhaps you'd see that in the Gleaners, something like that. That book, and this is, of course, I'm not giving you the books this time. In other ones, I have shown you pictures, covers of books that I recommend you look at. But that one is a very, very nice one, the Millet book by Julia Cartwright. Julia Cartwright seems to have been an author who liked to do historical, especially biographical novel. And I'm hard-pressed to even call it a novel. It's really truly not a novel, but it's a pulled-together description of a guy's life. So maybe just call it a biography. But she gives so many of the right quotes. She's really got the best ones that pertain to painting. You almost don't have to go anywhere else, Sensier and others. Millet, by the way, is also a huge fan of Poussin, or at least quotes him a number of times. Maybe we include that here. I'm not sure. Now, here's Ang saying, draw, paint, copy especially, even if it's still life. Everything copied from nature is a piece of work, and this imitation leads to art. And so we have Reynolds a little later talking about still life. But it's good to hear that, isn't it? Especially if you're rather stuck doing just still life because you can't afford a model at the moment or have other obstacles. Ang says, in art, you can only arrive at an honorable result by weeping. He who does not suffer does not believe. Well, there you go. Famously, he was the guy found crying in the woods because of his drawing. What a wonderful story that is, that whole background. And Walter Pock would be a source for a bunch of the Yang stuff, but the other one, Gamel's book, which I've offered to you, really not full-size book, but is the Ang via Amari Duval, Gamel's translation of that. And if anyone wants it, do ask me for it, okay? So, and this I think is the last, it's not sourced as Ang, but it is. Figure out the secret of the beautiful from the true and lay hold of it at that source. I have found in my life that making it more and more and more like, I found that you can't escape from the beautiful. It winds up being the confirmation, but it isn't based on, and so several times he says other ones, I'm not going to exhaust you with that tonight, we've talked about it before, but he talks about the beautiful and the true in a tandem and enabling you to get truth by way of beauty and to get beauty by way of more truth. So if people think you mean truth meaning more stuff, that wouldn't be the truth we're talking about. So think that one over. Reynolds tells in his discourses, which you really want to read if you want to be a painter. Anyone I'm talking to, if you really want to be a good painter, and I'm talking about if you want to have professional quality background, read these sources. Read Reynolds' discourses, and it's available everywhere. A man who can paint a still life can paint anything, says Reynolds. Of course, you can understand fully why that would be, right? You have the whole problem of designing, setting up a design that'll work in a picture out of things and stuff, objects, as if you were making an imaginative picture. And that kind of is almost sums up what we do. Don't neglect it. That's your best chance to go through composition over and over again without spending, many years getting one done. Leonardo says, now, I brought this quote because some of my students are doing middle tones right now and they haven't addressed this, and I haven't pointed it out to them. We talk about smoke. Sfumato, Da Vinci uses that word to describe how you handle middle tones. And so he says here, see that your shadows and lights are united without heavy strokes or marks. And that's the battleground between the forces of darkness and the forces of light, as Gamel would call it, the middle tones. So you don't want them, you want claw marks and a chunk, chunk, chunk. You want them to be united, gracious, very, 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 graciously, be a good word, gradually and mark-free, as in the case of with smoke. So there you are, Blake, or whoever's looking at this right now. Degas says the beauty of painting is as much in the approach as in the finish. There must be unity, homogeneity, beginning to end. It must be built up like a symphony, logically, uniformly, with an end in view from the outset. Yeah, I've read this to you before, not so far back. The beauty of painting is as much in the approach as in the finish. Looking for unity right from the start. Homogeneity, good word. Hanging togetherness, all the parts hanging together. Homogeny. Logically, uniformly, like a symphony. Beautiful. Most people think painting is a God-given talent, says Benson. It isn't. And I think this is where he's talking to his daughter, another one of those packages you can get from me if you like. It's probably on the Twilight of Painting website right now that Blake set up. It's a product of hard work and intense mental effort, and only those can succeed who have the capacity for work and the necessary intelligence, says Benson. Who thinks of painters that way? Yeah, most people think this is a talent thing. You just go and breathe something. But the idea of hard work and intense mental effort, this is the perfect description of Larry Bird, the basketball player, right, Larry? Not that you're watching this. I don't think it was you in the at the Celtics that was into the painting. Who was that? One of your coaches? Soraya says, all the mistakes committed by great artists are due to having separated themselves from truth, believing that their imagination is stronger. There's nothing stronger than nature, says Soraya. You'd think that was some three other guys, wouldn't you? There's nothing stronger than nature. So, it says form truth. It should say from truth. I'm finding these now. I've already corrected a few. All the mistakes committed by great artists are due to having separated themselves from truth. This is truth and beauty, huh? Stay on. Believing that their imagination is stronger. Delator, but speaking about their story, always makes you, and Benson both make you think of color in certain ways. Color is not to be considered relative, as to do so has the effect of encouraging laziness and mannerisms in the imitation of nature. Now, it's a funny thing because the colors are relative, right? So you know that from our conversation at any rate, that we can't paint exact matches of things, so we have to take the ones that are important. We have to say what's our darkest dark and light going to have to be? What's our most chromatic note, and how close can I approximate that? And so on. And you have all those things set these ranges in which you're going to have to live relatively. You're going to have to live relative to these facts, these choices, shall we say. So in that sense, he doesn't mean it to be relative. Color isn't to be considered relative. Color, and I think he means by that the only, color is not to be considered just whatever you sort of can make work, because it has the effect of encouraging laziness and mannerisms. And so you can take any color you feel like and just use it wherever and so on. But think about that one. That one's that's interesting, because this is Delator, a portrait painter, who's actually his skin tones are beautiful indeed. Considered relative. Interesting in translation. It'd be interesting to see that translated some other way. I have just a few more, but this one I've passed on to you before, and this is, I think, from the book on Millet. And so when I start, there's a parenthesis down there where Millet says of himself, that must be Julia Cartwright speaking. Vernet's rapidity of execution has passed into a proverb, but he was, here I am again, as the slowest of mortals. He drew his figure with charcoal upon the canvas in the most painstaking manner, every touch, slowly and deliberately. But as he took time to think, i.e., look before he leaped, he was as sure as he was slow, and lost but little time in replacing. Millet says of himself that though he knows the human figure by heart so as to be able to draw it perfectly without the model, he is still obliged to proceed very slowly and cautiously. The great thing, and this we're back to Millet speaking, the great thing is to bring your mind to your work. Look at these typos. Rembrandt is reported to have said, when I stop thinking, I stop working. Good stuff. Yeah, very good stuff. Start slow so you can finish fast. Remember that one from Ang? Start slow so you can finish fast. Even Leonardo alludes to that when he tells you to be methodical or whatever at the beginning of your own training, and speed will come. Those sorts of things are all parallels, or at least they follow along the same psychology, shall we say. All right, just three more. Here we go. An artist must compel nature to pass through his intelligence and his heart. Intelligence obviously has everything to do with this to this and that to that. Not what are your methods? Even training yourself to be good at, but so there's all this stuff, the thought that goes with it, having a concept, all those things. But then there's this other side of it, compelling nature. In other words, your job is to actually to take in what it is you're seeing and respond to it, and get your work to cause that same response in the viewer, as it were, right? That's in that category. So one more from Millet. Woe to the artist who shows his talent rather than his picture. Oops. The mentality of the show off. Are you trying to make something of yourself, or are you trying to make something for others and for eternity, and et cetera, et cetera? Very interesting question. Woe to the artist who shows his talent rather than his picture. And I've given you that story before about the Buddhist painter monk who was painting and painting, and as he got further and further into his subject, he began to more disappear. And one day they came in and found the subject, but no painter. And there's a fascinating parallel there. And these are all arts related in the broadest sense. You'll hear those conversations in other venues. Let's leave you with one last one. The noblest ambition is that of leaving behind something of permanent value. To travel, hopefully, is better than to arrive. The noblest ambition is that of leaving behind something of permanent value. So that's what we are. That's, so that leaves behind a lot of things, doesn't it? That leaves out a lot of things. The noblest ambition is to have been the most famous painter of your day, the richest painter of your day. This has a wonderful humility and yet a demand, right? Leave something of value behind. Does your painting actually have value, or to others? That's what it means when you say value. You mean value to others. So, yeah, it's not a good one. A good one to end on. The noblest ambition is that of leaving behind something of permanent value, lasting value. So that's the whole discussion about, are you painting for posterity? Are you painting, and when you're comparing yourself to others, is it through the prism of what has blessed you, So leaving something of permanent value behind. Yeah. Or did you just have fun, being an artiste? Those things are all interesting thoughts, aren't they? All right, guys. That's what I have this week. If you got questions, discussions for the next one, please be in touch. I keep looking. I'm not sure I'm looking in the right place all the time. It used to be that we would collect them all in one place, and I have to talk to Mr. Producer about where that place is now, or what I have to do to access it again. So now I just go out, like the rest of you, and look under the video online, and if I don't see a quote there, I don't see it. So it's possible you guys are asking or discussing things, and I'm not seeing it. So if you're inclined to, go ahead and send me an email. By the way, the last one is, I think his name is not Thomas Hardy. It might be Thomas Hardy, but he's the author of The Mathematician's Apology, which is an interesting book, significantly about Pascal. And another one of those sources for potential, cross-pollination for your form. All right. Well, enough of that for this time. I may do this again several times if I find that, if nobody tells me that I've been doing it. And I've carefully marked the ones I've already talked to you about, or offered to you. So we may do that again. If you really find this boring, send me some questions, and we'll talk about something with images on it. All right. Meantime, these are yours. Enjoy your reading. Enjoy your work this week. And we'll see you in the next one.